She moved like a ghost through the military base, her quiet competence mistaken for weakness. They mocked her, dismissed her insights, and questioned her presence among warriors. When she dared challenge a mission plan that would endanger lives, the general snapped. In front of everyone, he grabbed her collar, tearing her shirt in a display of dominance. The room froze. On her back, revealed for all to see, was a tattoo only the highest-ranking officers recognized, the mark of an elite operator whose very existence was classified. His attempt to humiliate her instantly backfired. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing for more tales of hidden strength and unexpected revelations. Forward operating base. Talon hummed with pre-dawn activity as officers filed into the command center. Lieutenant Zephyr Thorne slipped in quietly, taking a seat at the back. Her simple attire, charcoal pants, navy button-up, and light jacket despite the desert heat, stood in stark contrast to the crisp uniform surrounding her. She arranged her documents with methodical precision, seemingly oblivious to the sideways glances from military personnel. The room buzzed with conversation as tactical officers discussed the upcoming mission briefing. Zephyr remained silent, her dark eyes tracking movement patterns across the room while her hands organized her materials with practiced efficiency. When a junior officer bumped her chair without acknowledgement, she simply readjusted her position without comment. Colonel Lysander Evershaw entered, his imposing figure commanding immediate attention. The room fell silent as he strode to the front, followed by his executive staff. Major Callista Reeves, his second-in-command, shot a questioning glance at Zephyr before taking her position beside the tactical display. At 0400 hours, intelligence confirmed increased activity in the Kazbeki region, Evershaw began, his voice resonating with authority. Satellite imagery shows movement patterns consistent with the Azrael network. We believe they're preparing for another strike, potentially targeting Allied infrastructure. The digital map illuminated behind him, highlighting terrain features and potential threat zones. The situation has deteriorated significantly. Intelligence confirms terrorist activity concentrated in these three sectors. Red markers populated the screen, creating a triangle around a mountainous region. Zephyr watched the briefing with unwavering focus, occasionally making small notations in her notebook. When Colonel Evershaw opened the floor for tactical input, several officers offered standard approaches: direct action teams, surveillance positions, extraction plans. After the initial suggestions quieted, Zephyr raised her hand slightly. Some officers exchanged glances, clearly surprised by her participation. "Sir," she said, her voice quiet but clear, "recent geological surveys indicate the northern approach has unstable terrain patterns that don't appear in older maps. The proposed insertion point sits on a fault line that showed activity last month." Colonel Evershaw barely looked up from his tablet. "Thank you, Ms. Thorne. We'll take that under advisement." "Lieutenant," she corrected softly. "Pardon?" "My rank is lieutenant, sir." An uncomfortable silence followed before Evershaw nodded curtly. "Of course, Lieutenant Thorne. As I said, we'll consider your input." Major Callista Reeves tapped her stylus against her tablet. "Perhaps we should focus on actionable intelligence rather than geography lessons," she said, her voice carrying a hint of disdain. Several officers chuckled, clearly appreciating the dismissal. From across the room, Captain Orion Blackwood observed the exchange with interest. Recently returned from a difficult deployment along the eastern border, he had developed a keen eye for evaluating personnel. Something about the way Thorne carried herself, the economy of her movements, how her eyes continuously tracked entries and exits, her unusual stillness amid the chaos, struck him as incongruous with her apparent position. The briefing continued for another hour, with detailed discussions of enemy capabilities, terrain challenges, and logistical requirements. Throughout, Zephyr remained attentive, but offered no further input. When the room dispersed for a brief recess, Blackwood overheard two junior officers near the coffee station. "Who invited the pencil pusher?" one whispered, glancing toward Zephyr, who stood examining a topographical display. "Some civilian consultant," the other replied. "Probably hasn't seen anything more dangerous than a paper cut." They snickered, making no effort to lower their voices despite Zephyr standing barely 10 feet away. If she heard them, she gave no indication, continuing her study of the terrain model with methodical focus. Blackwood poured himself coffee, noting how Zephyr positioned herself with clear sight lines to all exits, a habit he recognized from combat veterans, not office staff. Before he could approach her, alarms blared throughout the base, cutting the recess short. The morning's briefing was interrupted when General Alaric Hargrove burst through the doors, his face grim. The room immediately stood at attention. At 0600 hours, the embassy in Nazgir was attacked, he announced without preamble. 17 dead, including Ambassador Roswell and his security detail. The room fell silent as the implications settled over everyone. We're forming a specialized counterterrorism task force effective immediately. General Hargrove activated the main screen, displaying a list of names organized by specialization and operational role. Zephyr's name appeared under Tactical Intelligence Support. Major Reeves couldn't contain her reaction, her eyebrows rising in visible surprise. "General, with all due respect," she said, stepping forward, "is Lieutenant Thorne's inclusion necessary? Her expertise seems, well, limited for an operation of this magnitude." Several officers nodded in agreement, looking toward Zephyr with expressions ranging from confusion to outright dismissal. General Hargrove glanced at Zephyr dismissively. "Orders from above, Major. Apparently we need a liaison with intelligence services." His tone made clear his agreement with Reeves' assessment. "The task force will assemble for preliminary training at 1400 hours. Dismissed." As personnel filed out, Captain Blackwood noticed something curious. A visiting commander from Naval Special Warfare Command did a double-take upon seeing Thorne, his expression shifting from confusion to something resembling recognition before quickly masking both. The commander exchanged a brief glance with an admiral Blackwood didn't recognize, both men watching Zephyr with an intensity that seemed mismatched with her apparent role. 3 days later, the task force assembled for preliminary training. Officers in full tactical gear ran drills on the base's training course, demonstrating their physical readiness and tactical proficiency. When Zephyr's turn came, several officers paused to watch, clearly expecting a substandard performance. Instead, she completed each exercise without breaking a sweat, her movements efficient and precise. She cleared obstacles with practiced ease, demonstrated textbook shooting stances, and finished the course with a time that placed her in the upper quartile of performers. Yet no one commented on her surprisingly strong showing, and when equipment was distributed later that afternoon, she received outdated gear without complaint. During the language assessment phase, she surprised the translators by speaking 3 regional dialects fluently, including an obscure mountain variant used primarily by isolated communities in the target region. The intelligence officer raised an eyebrow but said nothing as Zephyr correctly identified cultural nuances that would be critical for the operation's success. That evening, as Captain Blackwood cleaned his weapon in the armory, Zephyr entered. She nodded politely before selecting a standard-issue sidearm from the rack. Blackwood watched as she disassembled, inspected, and reassembled the weapon with practiced hands, calloused hands that betrayed years of similar movements. "You've handled that model before," he observed casually. "Once or twice," she replied, her voice soft but steady as she checked the weapon's sights. "Interesting choice. Most would go for the newer version with the integrated tactical light." "The older model has better weight distribution," she explained without looking up, "and fewer electronic components to fail in dust storms." Blackwood nodded, noting her practical assessment. "You seem to know your way around tactical operations for an intelligence liaison." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "We all have different backgrounds, Captain." Before Blackwood could respond, alarms blared throughout the base. Both of them immediately secured their weapons and moved toward the command center. "Intelligence has located our target," a communications officer announced as task force members assembled. "General Hargrove wants full tactical planning to begin immediately." As they walked, Blackwood noticed the visiting Naval Special Warfare Commander watching Zephyr from across the courtyard. Something in the commander's expression, a mixture of respect and concern, deepened Blackwood's curiosity about the unassuming lieutenant. The next morning, tactical planning sessions began in earnest. Officers gathered around holographic displays showing target locations, approach vectors, and defense systems. As various specialists offered input on their areas of expertise, Zephyr remained largely silent, studying the tactical displays with intense focus. When she finally spoke, Her observation about patrol patterns revealed an inconsistency no one else had noticed. The security rotations show a 3-minute gap in the southeastern quadrant. It's subtle, but consistent across 3 days of surveillance. Colonel Evershaw actually looked impressed. "Good catch, Lieutenant." Major Reeves frowned. "It could be a trap, deliberately showing a weakness to draw us in." "It's not deliberate," Zephyr replied. "It's a result of shift changes combined with the terrain layout. The guards can't see each other during handoff because of the elevation change." Her assessment proved correct when additional surveillance confirmed exactly the pattern she'd identified. Despite this contribution, when the team broke for lunch, Zephyr ate alone, still treated as an outsider by most of the task force. That afternoon, during weapons qualification, Zephyr demonstrated exceptional marksmanship that should have drawn attention. Instead, the rangemaster merely nodded and recorded her scores without comment. Captain Blackwood, watching from nearby, wondered how someone with her obvious skills remained so deliberately overlooked. Later, reviewing intelligence reports in the secure room, Blackwood overheard a conversation between 2 senior officers. "That Thorne woman gives me the creeps," one said. "Something off about her." "Probably just another headquarters appointment," the other replied. "You know how it goes. They send these analysts into the field to get their tickets punched, then promote them to positions where they'll make decisions about operations they don't understand." Blackwood watched as Zephyr, sitting just within earshot, continued her work without any sign she'd heard the remarks. Her ability to remain focused amid open disrespect impressed him almost as much as her tactical insights. That evening, as mission planning intensified, Zephyr identified a critical vulnerability in the proposed extraction plan. She approached General Hargrove privately, apparently hoping to avoid creating friction in front of the team. From his position across the room, Blackwood couldn't hear the exchange, but Hargrove's dismissive gesture told him everything he needed to know. As days passed, the pattern continued, Zephyr offering valuable insights that were either dismissed or reluctantly acknowledged, her presence tolerated rather than welcomed despite her obvious competence. Yet she never complained, never demanded recognition, simply continued performing her duties with quiet efficiency. The mission was scheduled for the following night. With final preparations underway, tension filled the base as personnel focused on their assigned tasks. Equipment was checked and rechecked, intelligence reports scrutinized for any last-minute developments, and communication protocols verified. Throughout it all, Lieutenant Zephyr Thorne moved with purpose and precision, her unassuming presence belying capabilities that remained hidden beneath her quiet exterior, capabilities that would soon be revealed in ways no one at Forward Operating Base Talon could possibly anticipate. The command center buzzed with renewed urgency as the task force gathered for the final mission briefing. Screens displayed satellite imagery, thermal signatures, and topographical data of the target area. General Hargrove dominated the room, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no disagreement. "Intelligence confirms our target will be at the compound for approximately 3 hours," he announced, gesturing to the main display. "This gives us a narrow window of opportunity. Insertion at 0200 hours. Team Alpha secures the perimeter while Bravo extracts the target. Extraction at the northern ridge at 0500. Any questions?" Officers studied the operational details projected on the screens. Captain Blackwood noticed Lieutenant Zephyr reviewing the topographical display with unusual intensity, her brow furrowed in concentration. After a moment of deliberation, she raised her hand. Several officers exchanged glances, clearly irritated by another interruption from the liaison officer. "Sir," Zephyr said, her voice quiet but clear, "the northern extraction point shows significant terrain instability. Recent geological surveys indicate substantial underground water erosion that doesn't appear in our standard maps." General Hargrove's expression hardened. "Lieutenant Thorne," he interrupted, his tone clipped. "We've been conducting extraction since before you joined this task force. The northern ridge gives us optimal visibility and defensive positioning." "I understand, sir," Zephyr continued, unperturbed by his dismissal. "But the surveys from last month show the erosion has accelerated due to seasonal rains. The ridge may not support the weight of the extraction vehicles." "Did I ask for a geology lesson?" Hargrove's voice sharpened as several officers smirked. "This operation has been planned by experienced combat officers, not civilian consultants playing soldier." The room tensed. Several officers shifted uncomfortably while others seemed to enjoy watching the general put Zephyr in her place. Major Reeves made no attempt to hide her satisfaction at seeing the lieutenant's input dismissed so firmly. Zephyr remained calm, showing no reaction to the insult. With respect, General, the geological instability creates a high risk of landslides under helicopter downwash. The Eastern Ridge offers similar tactical advantages without the structural concerns. Colonel Evershaw glanced between Zephyr and the general, then studied the map more carefully. The eastern approach does provide comparable coverage, he offered cautiously. General Hargrove shot him a withering look. Are you suggesting we restructure the entire extraction plan because Lieutenant Thorne is worried about some rocks? Not suggesting anything, sir, Evershaw backtracked quickly. Just evaluating all options. Hargrove turned back to Zephyr, his face flushed with irritation. Lieutenant, your presence here is a courtesy extended by higher command. It does not give you authority to question operational decisions made by qualified personnel. Sir, I'm simply concerned about the safety of the extraction team, Zephyr persisted, her voice remaining level despite the growing tension. If the ridge collapses during extraction, we risk losing the entire squad. Your concern is noted and dismissed, Hargrove snapped. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable coordinating from base rather than joining the field team. The implied threat hung in the air. Captain Blackwood glanced around the room, noticing how it had divided. Junior officers seemed to be enjoying the dressing down, while several senior officers watched with uncomfortable expressions. The Naval Special Warfare commander who had recognized Zephyr earlier was now studying General Hargrove with undisguised disapproval. Zephyr straightened slightly, her posture subtly shifting. General, with all due respect, I must insist this extraction point be reconsidered. The lives of your personnel depend on it. A heavy silence fell over the room. No one had expected her to stand her ground so firmly against Hargrove's authority. You insist? Hargrove's voice boomed across the room as he strode toward her. Let me explain something, Lieutenant. Your position here is political window dressing. You have no combat experience, no field qualifications, and absolutely no authority to insist on anything in my command center. He towered over her, but Zephyr didn't flinch. The difference in their physical size made the confrontation look almost comical, like a thunderstorm bearing down on a single unmoved tree. Sir, the extraction point must be moved, she stated firmly. I cannot in good conscience allow the team to proceed with the current plan knowing the risks involved. Your conscience? Hargrove's face darkened as his volume increased. Your conscience means nothing compared to the years of experience in this room. Who do you think you are? The tension in the room had become palpable. Several officers looked away, uncomfortable with the public dressing down. Others watched with barely concealed satisfaction. Captain Blackwood took a half-step forward, then hesitated, unsure whether intervention would help or further inflame the situation. I am an officer attempting to prevent unnecessary casualties, Zephyr replied, her voice remaining steady despite Hargrove's proximity. The geological data is clear. That ridge will not support a helicopter landing under current conditions. Something snapped in Hargrove's expression. Years of unquestioned authority collided with what he perceived as insubordination from someone he considered irrelevant. His hand shot forward, grabbing Zephyr's collar, yanking her toward him. Listen carefully, he growled, his face inches from hers. You will fall in line, or you will be removed from this operation entirely. Do I make myself clear? The fabric of her shirt strained against his grip. Still, Zephyr didn't back down. Crystal clear, sir, but my assessment stands. The northern ridge is compromised. With a final surge of frustration, Hargrove tightened his grip. The sound of tearing fabric seemed to echo in the sudden silence as her shirt ripped from collar to shoulder. For one frozen moment, nothing happened. Then a coffee mug shattered on the floor. All eyes shifted to the source of the noise. Admiral Evander Blackstone, who had been observing from the back of the room, stood motionless, the remains of his ceramic mug scattered at his feet. His eyes were fixed not on the general's breach of protocol, but on what the torn fabric had revealed. Visible through the torn shirt was the edge of an intricate tattoo covering Zephyr's upper back and shoulder. Even partially exposed, there was something distinctive about its pattern that caused immediate recognition among certain personnel in the room. The Naval Special Warfare commander inhaled sharply. Colonel Evershaw's eyes widened in disbelief. Several senior officers with high security clearances exchanged meaningful glances. General Hargrove, still focused on asserting his authority, hadn't yet registered the significance of what his actions had revealed. This is my command, Lieutenant, and you will... General, Admiral Blackstone interrupted, his voice cutting through the room with quiet authority. "Step away from Lieutenant Thorne immediately." The shift in power dynamics was instantaneous. Hargrove turned, confused by the Admiral's intervention. "Sir, with all due respect, this officer has repeatedly challenged the operational plan and—" "I said step away," Blackstone repeated, each word precisely measured. "Now." Something in the Admiral's tone made Hargrove comply, though confusion showed clearly on his face. As he released his grip on Zephyr's collar, the torn fabric fell further, revealing more of the distinctive marking on her skin. Captain Blackwood, positioned with a clear view, felt a jolt of recognition. What he had glimpsed wasn't just any military tattoo, it was the legendary Ghost Wraith mark, a designation so classified that most military personnel believed it was merely a myth. The intricate design incorporated geographic coordinates, symbolic elements representing extraordinary achievements, and a distinctive pattern only given to members of the most elite special operations unit in existence, a unit that, officially, didn't exist. The atmosphere in the room transformed as recognition spread among those with sufficient clearance to understand what they were seeing. Junior officers, noticing the reaction of their superiors but not understanding its cause, looked around in confusion. Zephyr herself remained motionless, her expression unchanged despite having her closely guarded identity exposed. She made no move to cover the tattoo or to acknowledge its significance. Instead, she simply waited, as though the next move belonged to someone else. Admiral Blackstone walked forward slowly, his posture rigid with formality. He removed his own jacket and offered it to Zephyr with a slight bow of his head, a gesture of profound respect that further confused those watching. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the now silent room, "please accept my apologies for this unfortunate incident." Zephyr nodded once, accepting the jacket and slipping it on to cover her exposed back. Only then did she turn to face General Hargrove, whose expression had shifted from anger to uncertainty as he registered the Admiral's unexpected deference. "General," she said quietly, "I believe we were discussing the extraction point. As I was explaining, the Eastern Ridge provides equivalent tactical advantages without the geological instability. I recommend we adjust the plan accordingly." Before Hargrove could respond, Admiral Blackstone stepped forward. "The extraction point will be moved to the Eastern Ridge as Lieutenant Thorne recommends." His tone made clear this was not a suggestion. "General Hargrove, a word in private, if you please." As the two senior officers moved toward a side room, the remaining personnel stood in awkward silence, trying to process the dramatic shift that had just occurred. Major Reeves looked stunned, her earlier smugness replaced by confusion. Colonel Evershaw was studying Zephyr with new eyes, as though seeing her for the first time. Captain Blackwood approached her carefully. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "your jacket from earlier." He retrieved it from where it had fallen and offered it to her. "Thank you, Captain," she replied, her voice betraying no emotion despite the tumultuous scene that had just unfolded. "I served with support teams for Naval Special Warfare," he said, keeping his voice low. "That mark on your back, it's not possible." Zephyr met his gaze steadily. "Many things are possible, Captain. Some are simply classified beyond your clearance level." Before he could respond, the door to the side room opened. Admiral Blackstone emerged alone, his expression grave but composed. "Lieutenant Thorne, please join us. The rest of you take 30 minutes. We'll reconvene to finalize the adjusted operational plan." As Zephyr followed the Admiral into the side room, conversation erupted among the remaining officers. Theories and questions flew back and forth, with junior personnel pressing those who seemed to recognize the tattoo's significance for explanations. "What just happened?" Major Reeves demanded of Colonel Evershaw. "Why is everyone acting like she's suddenly in charge?" Evershaw shook his head slowly. "Callista, there are some things even I don't have clearance to discuss. But if that mark means what I think it does, we've been in the presence of someone extraordinary without knowing it." "What mark? What are you talking about?" "The tattoo on her back," Captain Blackwood interjected. "It's associated with a unit so classified most people think it's just a military legend." "Ghost Team Zero," whispered a senior intelligence officer nearby, his voice barely audible. "They don't exist on paper. Their missions never happened. Their personnel are officially assigned elsewhere." Reeves looked incredulous. "And you're saying Thorne is one of them? That quiet, unremarkable woman is some kind of super soldier? That's absurd." "Is it?" Blackwood challenged. Think about it. Her marksmanship scores, her physical performance, her tactical insights, her language proficiency. We've been watching the evidence for days without putting it together. The intelligence officer nodded. The best operators are the ones you never notice until it's too late. Their ability to blend in, to be underestimated, is part of what makes them effective. The implications settled over the group as they waited for the leadership to return. The operation they were about to undertake had suddenly taken on new dimensions. If Lieutenant Zephyr Thorne was indeed a member of Ghost Team Zero, what did that suggest about the true nature of their mission? When the door finally reopened 20 minutes later, Admiral Blackstone emerged with Zephyr beside him. General Hargrove followed, his expression unreadable but his earlier belligerence notably absent. Officers, the Admiral addressed the room, there have been some adjustments to the command structure of this operation. Lieutenant Thorne will now serve as tactical lead. General Hargrove will coordinate base operations while Colonel Evershaw will manage field communications. Are there any questions? The room remained silent, the dramatic reversal of authority too shocking for immediate response. Very well, Blackstone continued. Lieutenant Thorne will now brief you on the revised operational plan. Zephyr stepped forward, her demeanor unchanged despite her elevated position. She activated the tactical display with practiced ease, bringing up the eastern ridge she had recommended earlier. Our insertion timeline remains unchanged, she began, her quiet voice somehow carrying more authority than Hargrove's had at full volume. However, we will adjust our approach vectors to account for recent enemy patrol changes. Team compositions will be restructured as follows. As she laid out the revised plan with precision and clarity, Captain Blackwood observed the room's reaction. Junior officers who had dismissed her hours earlier now hung on her every word. Senior personnel who had tolerated her presence now deferred to her expertise. Only her eyes, scanning the room with the same alertness they had shown when she first arrived, revealed that beneath the calm exterior, Lieutenant Zephyr Thorne was acutely aware of how completely everything had changed. As fabric tore away, the room fell into stunned silence. Revealed across Zephyr's upper back was an intricate tattoo unlike anything most had ever seen, the legendary Ghost Wraith mark. The design incorporated precise coordinates, symbolic elements representing classified achievements, and a distinctive pattern known only to the highest echelons of special operations. Even partially visible, its significance was unmistakable to those with sufficient clearance to recognize it. The visiting admiral who had dropped his coffee was the first to move. He stood at rigid attention, eyes forward, posture perfect, a show of respect typically reserved for the highest-ranking officers. One by one, senior officers with sufficient clearance to recognize the mark followed suit. Captain Blackwood, who had served with Naval Special Warfare Support Teams, felt his breath catch as the implications registered. Around the room, those with high-security clearances straightened almost involuntarily, while others looked on in confusion. "She's Ghost 6. Blackwood whispered to no one in particular. The only survivor of Operation Stillwater. The intelligence officer beside him inhaled sharply. That's not possible. Ghost 6 is dead. The entire team was lost 3 years ago. Apparently not, Blackwood replied, watching as recognition continued to spread across the room. Junior officers looked confused but sensed the dramatic shift in atmosphere. The room had transformed from contemptuous dismissal to something approaching reverence in seconds. General Hargrove's face drained of color as recognition dawned. He had just publicly assaulted one of the most decorated special operators in military history, someone whose missions were so classified that her service record officially didn't exist, someone whose operational authority in certain contexts exceeded even his own. Without a word, Admiral Blackstone walked forward, picked up Zephyr's torn jacket from the floor, and held it for her to put on. A gesture of profound respect. The message was unmistakable to everyone present. This woman outranked them all in ways that transcended traditional military hierarchy. Zephyr accepted the jacket with a slight nod, her expression unchanged. She turned back to the tactical display as if nothing had happened. The eastern ridge provides equivalent visibility with solid bedrock foundation, she continued calmly. Extraction can proceed there without compromising operational security or personnel safety. The Admiral cleared his throat. General Hargrove, I'll be assuming command of this operation effective immediately. Lieutenant Thorne will serve as tactical lead. Hargrove, still stunned, could only nod mutely. As the briefing reconvened under new leadership, Captain Blackwood noticed how the room's dynamics had completely inverted. Officers who had smirked at Zephyr hours earlier now hung on her every word, while those who had dismissed her insights now struggled with their embarrassment. When the meeting concluded, the newly reorganized teams dispersed to prepare for the operation. Zephyr remained behind, reviewing final intelligence reports with Admiral Blackstone and Colonel Evershaw. Their body language had transformed completely. Where before they had tolerated her presence, now they deferred to her expertise without question. Later that evening, as pre-mission preparations intensified, Captain Blackwood found Zephyr alone in the tactical room, reviewing satellite imagery of the target area. "Permission to speak freely, Lieutenant?" he asked from the doorway. She glanced up. "Always, Captain. Why didn't you correct anyone's assumptions? You could have ended the disrespect immediately." Zephyr considered the question carefully before responding. "Effectiveness doesn't require recognition. The mission matters, not who gets credit." She closed the file she'd been reviewing. "Besides, people reveal more when they underestimate you." Blackwood leaned against the doorframe. "The tattoo, Ghost Team Zero, isn't supposed to exist. Most operators think it's just a myth." "Neither am I, officially," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. "The cell we're tracking, they're connected to what happened at Stillwater. I've been following them for 3 years using this liaison position as cover." 3 years undercover as a military analyst? Blackwood whistled softly. "That's dedication." "It's necessity," Zephyr corrected. "After Stillwater, the network went dormant. Conventional approaches couldn't track them. Sometimes patience is the only viable tactic." Blackwood processed this information. "So all this time, while everyone was dismissing you, all this time, I've been exactly who I appeared to be, someone focused on completing the mission." She stood, gathering her materials. "The only difference is now people are paying attention." "For what it's worth," Blackwood said, "I noticed something was different about you from the beginning." A hint of a smile crossed her face. "I know. That's why you're on the primary extraction team." As she walked past him toward the door, Blackwood had one more question. "The General. What happens to him?" Zephyr paused. "That's above my pay grade, Captain. But in my experience, the military takes care of its own, one way or another." The operation launched at precisely 0200 hours the following morning. Under Zephyr's leadership, the insertion proceeded with flawless precision. Team Alpha secured the perimeter while Team Bravo, with Captain Blackwood among them, penetrated the compound. Their target, a high-value terrorist leader, was captured with minimal resistance, exactly as Zephyr had predicted. The extraction proceeded without incident from the eastern ridge, just as she had recommended. As the helicopters touched down on solid ground, Blackwood couldn't help but imagine what might have happened had they attempted to land on the northern ridge as originally planned. Upon return to base, the mission debrief revealed the full extent of their success. Not only had they captured their primary target, but intelligence recovered from the compound provided links to 3 additional cells operating across the region. Junior officers who had once mocked Zephyr now studied her movements intently, trying to learn by observation what they hadn't been able to recognize before. Senior personnel who had dismissed her input now sought her approval on their assessments. The transformation was as complete as it was sudden. Through it all, Lieutenant Zephyr Thorne maintained the same quiet efficiency she had demonstrated from the beginning. She offered guidance when needed, clarification when requested, but never once referenced the dramatic change in how others perceived her. As the debriefing concluded, Admiral Blackstone approached with a classified folder. "Lieutenant Thorne, when you're finished here, we have another situation that requires your specific expertise." She nodded, accepting the folder without examining it. "I'll review this immediately, sir." "The intelligence recovered suggests connections to Nasrallah," the Admiral continued, referencing a notorious arms dealer whose network had eluded capture for years. "Your background with his organization makes you uniquely qualified to assess its authenticity." "Understood, sir. I'll have a preliminary analysis by 0800. Despite her revealed identity, Zephyr remained the same focused, humble operator she had always been. Extraordinary not because of recognition, but because of her unwavering commitment to the mission. As they walked away discussing details, Captain Blackwood watched them go, reflecting on how appearances had deceived them all. The quietest person in the room had been the most lethal, the most accomplished, the most worthy of respect, hiding in plain sight until circumstances forced her hand. Major Reeves approached, standing beside him as they both watched Zephyr disappear down the corridor with the Admiral. "I still can't believe it," Reeves admitted. "All this time, she was exactly who she appeared to be," Blackwood finished. "That's what makes operators like her so effective. We see what we expect to see." "But the disrespect, the dismissal, how did she tolerate it?" "Because the mission mattered more than her ego," Blackwood replied. "That's the difference between someone who needs to be seen as important and someone who actually is important." Later that evening, as the base settled into its normal rhythm, Blackwood found himself in the mess hall. Most personnel were giving Zephyr a wide berth, not out of disrespect now, but out of reverence. She sat alone, reviewing documents while eating, much as she had done every day since arriving. He hesitated, then made his decision. Walking over, he set his tray down across from her. "Mind if I join you, Lieutenant?" She glanced up, that same hint of a smile touching her lips. "Not at all, Captain." They ate in comfortable silence for several minutes before Blackwood spoke again. "You know, they're all terrified of you now." "I've noticed," she replied dryly. "It's inefficient. Fear impedes clear communication. What would you prefer?" She considered the question. "Respect is useful. Fear is not. I'd prefer they see me as a resource rather than a legend." "That tattoo makes it difficult," Blackwood observed. "The ghost wraith mark carries quite a reputation." "Reputations are stories we tell about people," Zephyr said. "Sometimes they're accurate, often they're not. Either way, they're less important than what happens next." "And what happens next, Lieutenant?" She closed her folder. "We continue the mission, Captain. The network we're tracking extends far beyond one compound or one leader. Today was a single step in a longer journey." "Will you maintain your cover?" he asked, "now that people know who you are?" "My identity was never the cover," she replied. "My purpose was. That hasn't changed." The next morning, the base buzzed with rumors about Lieutenant Thorne. Stories of Ghost Team Zero circulated among personnel, each more elaborate than the last. Some claimed the team could operate behind enemy lines for months without detection. Others insisted they had technology unavailable to conventional forces. All agreed they were the elite of the elite, operators so skilled they might as well be myths. Through it all, Zephyr continued her work with the same methodical focus she had shown before. When junior officers approached her with questions about specialized tactics, she provided guidance without embellishment. When senior personnel sought her input on operational planning, she offered insights based on practical experience rather than theoretical knowledge. 3 days after the revelation, General Hargrove was quietly transferred to a different command. The official explanation cited reassignment to better utilize his strategic expertise. But everyone understood the reality. His public humiliation of a ghost team operator, regardless of whether he knew her identity, had ended his career advancement permanently. Colonel Evershaw, now serving as interim commander, made a point of consulting Zephyr on all operational decisions related to the ongoing counterterrorism efforts. The adjustment wasn't merely procedural, it represented a fundamental shift in how the base approached intelligence and tactical planning. A week later, as Zephyr prepared for another operation, Captain Blackwood encountered her in the armory. She was inspecting her equipment with the same careful attention she applied to everything. "I hear you're heading out tonight," he said. She nodded without looking up. "Follow up on intelligence recovered from the compound. Standard procedure." "Standard for Ghost Team Zero, perhaps?" This earned a genuine smile. "There is no standard, Captain. Only what works and what doesn't." Blackwood leaned against the workbench. "The team respects you now, not because of the tattoo, but because they've seen what you can do." "That's progress," she acknowledged. "Respect based on demonstration rather than designation." "Will you come back?" he asked. "After this operation?" Zephyr finally looked up from her equipment. "That depends on what we find. Ghost Team goes where it's needed." "And where are you needed, Lieutenant?" "Wherever the next mission takes me," she replied simply. "Just like any other soldier." "Not quite like any other soldier," Blackwood corrected. "The principles are the same," she insisted. "Accomplish the mission, protect your team, serve with honor, the rest is just details." As she finished preparing her equipment, Admiral Blackstone entered the armory. "Lieutenant, the transport is ready when you are." "Thank you, sir. I'm prepared to depart." The Admiral nodded, then extended his hand to Blackwood. Captain, your support during the last operation was exemplary. Lieutenant Thorne specifically requested you for this extraction team as well. Surprised, Blackwood glanced at Zephyr. I'm honored, sir. Briefing in 20 minutes, the Admiral informed him. I suggest you prepare your gear. After Blackstone departed, Blackwood turned to Zephyr. You requested me? Good operators are worth keeping close, she replied, closing her equipment case. Besides, you notice things others miss. That's valuable. Coming from you, I'll take that as high praise. Take it as recognition of demonstrated capability, Captain, she said, the ghost of a smile returning. Isn't that what we all want in the end? To be valued for what we can do rather than how we appear. As they walked toward the briefing room together, personnel throughout the base acknowledged Zephyr with newfound respect. Not the fearful deference of the days immediately following the revelation, but the genuine respect earned through demonstrated excellence. The quiet woman who had once been invisible among them now stood recognized for who she truly was. Not a legend, not a myth, but a consummate professional whose worth had always been there for those willing to see beyond appearances. You know, Blackwood said as they reached the briefing room door, some might say the General did you a favor by exposing your identity. Zephyr considered this. Perhaps, but the most valuable work often happens in the shadows, unrecognized and uncelebrated. Sometimes staying invisible is the greater service. Is that why you chose Ghost Team? To disappear? I chose to serve where I could be most effective, she corrected. Recognition was never the point. With that, she pushed open the door to the briefing room where a new mission awaited, one that would once again require all her skills, whether others recognized them or not.